It's often said that fate plays funny tricks. In fact, most believe that you cannot change fate no matter how hard you try. But they think that fate has a way of charting its own course, and that those who challenge what is destined will always be met with disappointment. But before you surrender to the hands of destiny, you might consider the power of the human spirit and the force that lies in your own free will to shape your own destiny in ways that defy the imagination. For most, as strange as it may sound at first, that force lies dormant in a subconscious construct that I call the egg. A famous psychologist by the name of Carl Jung put it like this: when an inner situation is not made conscious, it appears outside as fate. This video is about awakening within you what lies dormant and breaking free what's squeezed inside the construct of your egg. The way for you to experience and reconnect with the astonishing power of this creative life force that fuels and drives you and all of us at the core of our being is to crack that egg, to crack your egg. And right now, you're about to learn how. Hey everybody, welcome back to Crack Your Egg, and this is the second video presentation already, so I don't know about you, but to me, time is certainly moving fast. Anyway, first of all, I want to thank you for all the great comments and questions I've been receiving to the first video presentation. I really appreciate all of it. So to recap real quick on what we've been covering so far, in our previous conversation we went into considerable detail about what the egg is, and if you missed it, you can of course still watch it by clicking on the link to the right, but let's get into the details of this video presentation first. So to set the stage for this one, let me quote a piece from our last conversation in which we heard Veronique from South Africa describe what we're talking about as follows. It's weird. I've always felt there's this strange energy that always seems to put up a block in whatever endeavor I seem to pursue. Now that strange energy she mentioned is exactly what I'm referring to when I'm talking about that egg. And to add to the definition, in the ebook that I gave you with the last video presentation, we put it like this. This eggshell is basically an energetic cocoon in the form of a low vibrational web of suppressed thoughts, feelings, and limiting belief systems, and their associated big-time negative emotional charge. The latter is actually what's holding the whole structure together like superglue or a heavy construction cement layer. Together, these factors make up an energetic eggshell that's like a force field that completely colors and filters your worldview, locks up your naturally expansive potential, and blocks the flow of universal life energies in and out of your system. It filters your perception of who you are, where you are, and the world and life in general, often even to the extent that most of us get so mesmerized by our experience inside that egg that we simply can't conceive of any other reality anymore. That's the short version of what the egg is, and for more details you can watch the first video presentation again. It should help you get the picture of what we're talking about here and help you become aware of your egg, which is the first step towards actually cracking it and breaking free. So now in this video presentation we're going to take it up a notch and talk about what the egg does to you. This will give you an even more detailed grasp of what you're dealing with, which in turn puts you in an even more powerful position to break out because you'll know about its method of operation. So to explain what your egg can do to you, I've put together two things for you. The first is this video presentation. After watching it, you'll know exactly what your egg can do to you, how it does that, and why your life can't help but transform radically once you crack it. Like I said, once you understand what you're dealing with at this level of detail, by the time you've gone through today's session, you'll have some very strong handles to break out of your shell and step into an entirely new life experience. In short, you'll have stepped into stage 2 of the Crack Your Egg process. And secondly, I've put together another ebook that you can download through the link underneath this video, and that book will go deeper and into a lot more detail to get you ready for stepping into stage 3 of the Crack Your Egg process, which is what we'll discuss in a few days from now. Anyway, let's get started on today's session with a little story. The short story that you're about to see is a quick visualization of what living in the egg is like and what life inside the egg feels like, so you'll probably recognize it. Based on this story, you'll be able to relate these feelings to your own life experience, so you'll get a much clearer grasp of your own egg. So watch it right now, and we'll pick things up again after the story. You know, I had me an uncle who, believe it or not, was actually called Egbert. So one day my uncle Egbert took me to this fairground, and there was a bungee trampoline that I was just dying to get on. Now, when you go on a thing like that, you're strapped into a corset with bungee cables attached to it. And these cables are also attached to some unmovable objects on your side. So as soon as you're strapped, you can start jumping on the trampoline. And you can make all kinds of hoops, bunny jumps, somersaults, pirouettes, and so on if you want. I love that. The great thing was that I felt safe that nothing bad could happen. Because in the end, whatever kind of trick I'd pull or jump I'd make, I'd stay in one place all the time. And that was because of the bungee cables being attached to both the corset and the unmovable objects that kept me there in that place. No matter what I tried, they'd always pull me back. And you know what? For most people, their whole life in general is a bit like this bungee trampoline experience. You see, from the moment we're born and over the course of our entire lives, we're exposed to a level of conditioning and all kinds of emotionally discomforting situations that gradually have us lose touch with the true nature of who we are. Through discomforts like guilt, fear, shame, anger, resentment, sorrow, and so on, we strap ourselves into a corset by creating limiting beliefs about ourselves and the world in general, which become the source of our deepest hurts, fears, and insecurities. The discomforts become our bungee cables, and the limiting beliefs the immovable objects that keep us stuck in one place, no matter what we try. They filter our perceptions and worldviews, usually even to the extent that we get so mesmerized by our blurred life experience that we can hardly conceive of any other reality anymore. In other words, we don't even realize we're in the corset. And no wonder. All this usually happens at a subconscious level. So often we make those bungee attachments and instill those unmovable beliefs without even consciously realizing. And so we can't put our finger on why our lives seem such a struggle, and why it seems so hard to make any significant progress, despite all the things we're trying. Still, we try to move forward, like through setting goals that define and envision the life that we think would herald the freedom and happiness we're after. And we do the things we consider necessary to make progress, to achieve or manifest those goals, to move towards that door, the door into the light of the great life we're after. But whatever we try to do, we might make some steps forward, but it always seems like such a struggle because of the opposing force of the ties that bind, the bungee cables, our attachments to the unconscious, limiting beliefs we have about ourselves and about the world in general. We try all kinds of stuff. We may even go through all kinds of hoops, funny jumps, somersaults, whatever we can to try and get what we want. But in the end, we're either pulled back and stay in one place, or indeed we seem to get closer to that door we want to go through, but there's always this opposing force pulling back at us, making it feel like it's a struggle to even stay where we are. So that experience in the bungee corset is the drag of living in the egg. That's what living in the egg is like. The impact of your egg is like that corset with the bungee cables. You try to move forward, but you're always pulled back. Some people are not aware of their egg in the first place, as we talked about in the previous video presentation. So for those people, the corset and the bungee cables are there, but they're effectively invisible. Like I said, these bungee cables are our attachments to limiting beliefs about ourselves, about who and what we are, about our relationships with other people, and about the world and the nature of life in general. Our belief systems tend to be completely unconscious, and our resulting thoughts, feelings, and actions completely habitual. So, these people have no idea what's really going on and why life can seem like such a struggle, but they live it anyway, in ignorance basically, and they're usually the people that are dragged through their days and complain all the time because they have no idea what's holding them back or keeping them small. It's that, or they just lead a life of simply getting by, which of course is fine if that's what you really want to do, and it's a conscious decision on your part to do so. But it's peanuts compared to what they're capable of. Anyway, then there's another group of people who are aware of somehow being stuck in this metaphorical corset, but don't know how to take it off. I mean, even if we do become aware of these beliefs, we usually don't know how to cut the cables or free ourselves from them. We try all kinds of self-help methods and techniques, which is kind of like attempting to cut one bungee cable at a time, hoping to gradually and eventually cut ourselves loose entirely. But aside from some occasional marginal improvements, nothing seems to help much. The bungee attachments pull back anyway, and we effectively stay in one place after all, despite all our hard efforts and genuine attempts to improve. And that's either because we feel the emotional charge associated with our attachments is too hard to handle for us, or due to the fact that those unconscious, limiting belief systems that lie at the root of it all act as filters that sabotage the very things we're trying to achieve. And usually it's even worse, a combination of both. So if that pretty much describes you, then life might be even more frustrating compared to the first group, because you do realize things can be much better and much more profound than they are, but you can't seem to make that a reality no matter what you try. But here's the good news. The good news is that you don't have to ponder over every single detail of those beliefs, or the emotional charge attached to them in order to let go of them and break free. Actually, you don't even have to cut every single cable one at a time in order to break free and step into the light without attachment. Believe it or not, but the solution you're looking for can be much simpler. In fact, with the right understanding, the right methods, and the right techniques, you don't have to take it one step at a time. You can simply take off the entire corset at once and walk away from the bungee trampoline freely into a new life experience without ever having to look back. Into the flow, where everything in life seems to go exactly as it should. So about those egg elements. First of all, at some point in our lives, we've all had some sort of experience that we perceived at the time as very discomforting, in some cases even traumatic. In fact, we've all had many of such experiences, all of us. Like it's often the case with most people, you may not even appreciate the real impact that certain experiences might have had on you. After all, it's human nature to stuff discomfort away in order to cope and thus survive under what you experience as significant levels of discomfort and distress. For example, people who've experienced a car crash usually don't consciously remember the actual moment of impact. It's stuffed away inside because it's just too much discomfort and distress to deal with. This is a pretty extreme example, but the same thing happens with other and less immediate and dramatic forms of distress. Now, this tendency to stuff away is a result of a self-protective mechanism that also underlies the formation of your egg. Again, we've all had such discomforting experiences in our lives, all of us without exception. And whatever it was that caused these discomforts could have been something that happened to you, something that someone did to you, or something that someone said to you. Now, like I said, we all have these instinctual self-protective mechanisms programmed inside our minds and bodies. So because of the severe discomfort of whatever happened to you at any point in time that gave you such discomforting experiences, this instinctual self-protective mechanism instilled new patterns in your subconscious mind in order for you to be able to cope with the discomfort and the stress. So these patterns were designed in such a way that from the moment they were installed, your thoughts, feelings, and actions would be subconsciously steered in a way that was supposed to minimize the chances of ever experiencing that same sort of discomfort ever again. Now once again, this applies to all of us. We've all installed quite a number of those patterns through all the various things and discomforts that we've experienced throughout our lives, consciously or unconsciously. And in addition to that, ever since we were born, we've also been exposed to all kinds of conditioning through what our parents told us, what we learned in school, what the media fed us, and so on. This is how we slowly but steadily put more and more filters on reality as we grow up. All these experiences and their implicit and explicit messages, along with the typically discomforting feelings they evoke, install subconscious patterns, which will then determine the course of our conscious thoughts, feelings, and actions, and thus the path we take in life. I call these subconscious patterns egg filtering attributes, and in concrete, they're based on two things. The first is a set of root limiting beliefs, or rather, convictions that you basically decided upon during those moments of discomfort, without realizing you were actually doing so. And I'm going to give you a concrete example of that in a minute, so stay with me. And secondly, each of these root limiting convictions has an associated prime worriment. A prime worriment is basically a core concern that you're constantly occupied with at the subconscious level. One part of this concern is to avoid the kind of discomfort that I just mentioned, the one that left what I call an egg mark, and that made your subconscious mind instill the limiting conviction that lies at the root of this concern. And then the other part of this concern is to avoid any situations that may even potentially evoke the same or a similar sort of discomfort. So these two elements, the root limiting conviction and its associated prime worriment, effectively make up the foundations of the eggshell structure, and they subconsciously steer our ways of thinking, feeling, and acting on the conscious level. Now note that I'm saying subconscious all the time. That's because I want to stress that you may not be consciously aware of the actual underlying reason why you're thinking, feeling, and acting along certain ways and patterns at the conscious level, or the underlying reason why you always have that negative chat in your mind that you can't seem to get rid of no matter what you try. This is the reason. But I realize that this may still seem somewhat elusive, so let me give you a quick example to explain this concept in a way that's a little more tangible. For instance, let's say that throughout your younger years, your parents might have constantly emphasized and rewarded your performance, like in school, in sports, your job, and so on. And let's say they did that in such a way that the pressure and the resulting discomfort at the time was sufficient to leave an egg mark in your system, as a way for it to remember to avoid this kind of tension. Now, as a result of this egg mark experience, your subconscious mind may have concluded upon a root-limiting conviction that says that life rewards you for what you do, rather than for who you are. So deep within, you're convinced that you have to earn love and a sense of self-worth, instead of that being a natural part of you. So then, a prime worriment or core concern that might have gone along with this conviction is a fear of failure and a constant fear to make mistakes. Now, this is just one example of the installation of a root-limiting belief and its associated prime worriment through some form of discomfort or distress. Because there's obviously lots of other types of pressure and discomfort, and so there are also countless other examples of root-limiting beliefs and prime worriments around different themes. But we'll get into the details of that later. Right now, I'm trying to get you to understand this concept because this sort of discomfort or distress is what lays the foundation for your entire eggshell structure to be built on. And besides the fact that this is just one example, we're also merely talking about the foundational level of the egg here, the root levels, which is far from all there is. Because on this foundation of root-limiting belief and prime worriment, over time you'll build a strong construct of additional egg elements that together make up the force field that keeps you small, sabotages any endeavors you pursue, and undermines your desire to freely create the life you really want. So let me tell you what these egg elements include. First of all, the root-limiting beliefs and their associated prime worriments result in a so-called inner managing policy. This is a way of thinking and feeling that you're using on a subconscious level in order to cope with the discomfort caused by your prime worriments. For example, relating that our example prime worriment of a fear of failure and a fear to make mistakes, your tendency might be to constantly look for errors and flaws in yourself and in other people, and to constantly want to make improvements to compensate for those errors and flaws, all with a subconscious aim to take away anything and any circumstance that might once again cause or invoke that same discomfort that you're trying to avoid. So secondly, this managing process then leads to an unnatural focus of attention. In our example, the focus on errors and flaws. And even though the idea of the managing process is to cope with the stress of your core concerns, it actually has the opposite effect. You basically focus on things that are not conducive to your overall happiness, contentment, and success in life. So you just focus on the wrong things, the negative things actually, and you do that habitually, which means it's a habit, and it happens automatically. In fact, you might not even be consciously aware of the fact that you're doing this. This unnatural focus of attention can be very subtle and often occurs completely subconsciously, while you may consciously think that you're focusing on the good things. In simple terms, what happens is that you can't seem to get your mind out of this wrong focus. Most people will experience this as negative thoughts and feelings coming up all the time, no matter what they try to do to get rid of them or to focus on the good stuff. They just keep coming back. So on the conscious level, you may seem to be doing everything you can to improve your life and to be focusing on the good things. But on the subconscious level, something very different might be going on. So this is why it can be so hard to change the chatter in your mind even when you're trying to, and why negative thoughts keep coming back no matter what effort you take in trying to change that. It all has to do with your egg, and ultimately with its foundational elements upon which its entire structure is built. Anyway, usually this unnatural focus of attention results in the fact that you get stuck in what I call an emotional prison, which isn't really a prison with bars, but rather a prison for your mind and soul in the form of often completely subconscious and habitual ways of thinking, feeling, and acting that you don't seem to have any control over. It's basically sort of a survival or protection program running inside of you that you can't seem to change even when you're aware of it. To get back to our example, the emotional prison you may get into in this particular scenario might be anger and resentment, usually in the form of constant irritation and hate directed at yourself, others, and the world in general. There's always something wrong, and even if things are actually good, it's never good enough for you. From your perspective, there are always errors and flaws that need to be corrected. So next, this whole construct results in a certain personality type or character that you project to your outer world, which I refer to as your egg identity. In our example, this would be the personality of a perfectionist or a reformer who thinks along the lines of, I must be correct, I must have it all together, I must do everything the right way, I must be rational, and I must be in control. This identity isn't the real you, but rather the you that you project to your outside world, that you show to other people, and that results from your managing policy of avoiding errors and flaws, which in turn results from your prime worriment in the form of your fear of failure and your fear of making mistakes, which ultimately stems from your root-limiting belief that the world rewards you not for who you are, but for what you do. So you can imagine that over time this will become a real problem. I mean, this whole fake identity and the unnatural and imbalanced structure underlying it determines how you perceive yourself in reality. And so it can determine the whole course of your life and the path you take, which is highly unlikely to match your natural gifts and potential. And the example that I'm giving here is just one example of one particular belief and associated concern. There are many more of such beliefs and concerns, and most people have to deal with a great multitude of them at the same time rather than just one, which usually results in people living a life that's completely at odds with their natural potential and is as such completely out of flow. But to top it off, here's the real crux. Most people have done this sort of subconscious thinking, feeling, and believing for so long that it has become a habit for them. And so they've started to actually believe that this identity, this personality they project as a result of this entire underlying subconscious egg structure is who they really are, while nothing could be farther from the truth. Anyway, finally, through the entire subconscious construct that this egg identity is built on, you'll have automatic and habitual programs running through your subconscious that are completely designed to manage the inner discomforts that are reflected in those root-limiting convictions and their associated prime worriments. These subconscious patterns lie at the root of your conscious thinking, feeling, and acting. They're not built on a state of inner happiness and contentment or on uncorrupted creativity, but rather on a state of continuous discomfort in the form of fear, anger, resentment, guilt, sorrow, and so on, and a fundamental tendency to avoid those feelings. So that state will effectively be your true inner state, and as such, the real vibe you broadcast to the world around you, no matter how nicely you may try to decorate it with positive thoughts, visualizations, affirmations, and so on. And as the ebook that you can download underneath this video will outline for you in detail, your life and your external reality can't help but reflect this deeper state of mind. So contrary to what you might consciously think, you're not being the real, amazing, and powerful you, taking control of your mind and spirit. But instead, you're actually being a person covering up their deepest discomforts in a certain, often completely unconscious way that you may not even be aware of yourself, thus unconsciously focusing on the very things you don't want and taking the wrong path in life if success, fulfillment, and flow are what you're really after. So if you ever want to make significant changes in your life, this foundation of your eggshell, the egg mark with its deep inner level of inhibiting convictions, prime worriments, and discomfort is what you have to work on dissolving. Doing so typically requires a fundamental shift in orientation because most of today's prevailing methodologies and psychological orientations keep focusing on the superficial levels of this eggshell structure alone, even when we think we're digging deep into our limiting beliefs and uncomfortable emotions. And as a result, we hardly ever really get to the core of what's really keeping us stuck, let alone steer ourselves out of it. So, as opposed to merely bungling on the surface level, we need to know how to make sure that we dig down into the actual core of the eggshell structure, the egg mark level of which our core limiting beliefs and prime worriments are merely reflections and only the products of unconscious compensation strategies rather than the actual sources of our misery. And secondly, we need to learn how to bypass the filtering and sabotage that our egg imposes on our attempts to improve ourselves and to break through what's blocking us. Because aside from requiring the right direction, another challenge is that this eggshell force field can actually filter the impulses from all the various techniques and methods we employ in our genuine attempts to take it down. In other words, since the egg, the very force field that's keeping you small, is deeply invested in keeping itself intact, it has a way of sabotaging all our efforts to break free, and thus rendering most, if not all, of our well-intended efforts to make ourselves better completely useless, leaving us to wonder what we're doing wrong and why nothing seems to work. That last thing of bypassing that filtering is a whole story in itself, and it can put up some additional challenges because each and every one of us is unique, including you. So that means that you need to know how to customize your efforts in order to bypass your unique type of filtering. This is why some standardized set of affirmations or healing statements hardly ever works. We all need to tailor our approach to our own unique requirements. And this is something we'll talk about a lot more in the upcoming third part of this series. But if we ever want to take down our entire eggshell structure and take off that bungee corset, then these are the things we need to know how to do. But for now, I want to leave you with a major insight that would be the basis for a flawless methodology of discovering the essential elements of your eggshell structure, so that you can begin to gain a clear sense of the typical and unique things that you need to work on within you. So let's wrap up this video presentation so you can start preparing for that next step. As long as you don't know about the ins and outs and the method of operation of your egg, chances are that whatever you try to do to improve, you'll always be working on the superficial levels of your eggshell alone, and you'll hardly ever find yourself capable of transforming yourself at the core level, which is where the real changes are made. So understanding the eggshell structure that we've covered in this video allows you to move into stage 2 of the crack your egg process, which is identifying your unique egg elements, which in turn is a prerequisite to be able to crack your egg. Now here's how you can do that. Underneath this video, you can download another ebook that I want you to read immediately after you're done watching this video presentation. This ebook explains in great detail how this whole eggshell structure that we've been talking about actually manifests the very subconscious patterns of your egg in your life and in your physical reality, which are actually the very things you're trying to avoid. You'll also learn how your egg causes you to see and perceive your life and its circumstances, not for what they really are, but rather for what confirms your already distorted image of yourself and life in general. So in other words, as long as your egg is intact, life will always present you with the very things that you don't want to experience. That's because life reflects your true inner state of mind, and how you think and feel about yourself on a core level. If that state of mind is influenced by an egg mark, life will reflect and constantly evoke the kind of discomfort and distress that's associated with it. And it'll keep doing so until you've actually cracked your egg, so that the fundamental discomfort and distress it's built on is no longer there to be reflected anymore. This is a major and enormously empowering insight if you understand how to leverage it. It explains why so many people keep bumping into the same type of recurring problems in their lives time and time again. And it provides a means to dramatically accelerate your process of cracking your egg by helping you figure out the exact elements of your unique eggshell structure. So it's really important that you make use of this insight, and the book that you can download underneath this video will explain all the details. You'll be able to take a conscious look at the external circumstances of your life and then interpret them in order to find out what typical egg elements are being reflected. That way you can identify your exact prime worriments and root limiting beliefs. So for example, by looking at the circumstances of your life and the people you interact with, and then observing what sort of feelings and discomforts these people and circumstances invoke within you, plus by watching your typical patterns of thought, feeling, and behavior, you'll be able to translate those into the root limiting beliefs and prime worriments that make up the foundations of your egg, and so ultimately lie at the root of your life experience. Later on, we can talk more about entire blueprints and step-by-step protocols that I have available for you, which basically serve as a clear path that's already been completely mapped out for you to perform this kind of interpretation and identification flawlessly and with laser-sharp precision, while simultaneously bypassing your own unique type of filtering. That way you don't just have to randomly guess about the root elements of your eggshell structure, or just assume they're covered by the list you're given, like you're typically left to do. But for now, I don't want to overwhelm you, so all you need to do is understand how this is possible and how you can do this too. This way will set the stage so you can expect far better results once you actually start cracking your egg later on in the process. Because once you truly understand this mechanism, you'll be able to put yourself in the position of power to target the core foundations of your eggshell with laser-sharp focus. That's how you take the whole structure down in the most efficient and most effective way possible. In other words, that's how you take off that bungee corset from earlier in this video presentation so you can move, play, and create your life freely. So go read that ebook right now. And by the way, one last thing, don't forget to leave a comment below and share this with others if you think this can help them. There are some widgets underneath this video presentation that can make this more convenient for you. Anyway, thanks again and see you next time.